Awesome. Well, thanks for inviting me, Alejandra and Lydia. So we'll jump right into the presentation. And one of the main things that I would say kind of right off the bat is that a lot of these fundraising practices and principles are tried and true. They're they're the same ones that you're hearing in a bunch of different places. It's just the uniqueness of the application of them and how they're implemented sometimes are a little bit different. In the same way that direct mail works, it's always worked and it's been the best medium for fundraising. A lot of these practices are ultimately the ones that make a big difference. We're just going to kind of go talk through who donors are, what they want, how to tackle them from an individual donor perspective, and to think about them a little bit more broadly. Just to give everybody a little bit more background on me, I started out about 20 years ago in the nonprofit space, wanted to make a difference in my community, got into fundraising as a part of that. After working for about 8 years in small to mid-sized nonprofits, realized that there's a real challenge for development at those organizations where you don't have a full development team. You really need 3 people on your development team to be able to have a really effective team and they all have to have different types of skill sets. You need someone that can see vision and engage with people and be kind of an external, outward, front facing person. But at the same time, you need an admin person that can grind on your database and keep all of your back of the house things in order and everything kind of intact in that. And then you need someone that can do kind of like the visual pieces that come with all that, your invitations, your social medias, your communications, and each one of those skill sets for those areas alone are their own challenges. You throw on top of that grant writing, grant research, you have 8 or 9 different types of expertise that have to exist within a development team. And so if you can find one person that can do all those things, hold on to them for dear life because they are not very common. They are highly coveted. And I was looking into these spaces, I was saying, I can't do all the things that are being asked of me. I'm good at 70% of them, but I'm not good at 100% of them. And so I started on this journey of trying to identify the ways to figure out what that looked like in a meaningful way to help people bring together the resources that they needed. So I started Your Mission Possible, my consulting firm, with a group of 4 other people that had kind of those different buckets of expertise. And so we started a fractional service for development where we came together and we could provide you kind of what you needed within that space in development. So if you were really grants heavy, our writer was the main person that you were working with, but thinking strategically about who to engage with grants, et cetera, would be something that I would work on. So you would get kind of both of those assets in the same process, and you could kind of size that appropriately to your organization. And so after doing that for about 8 years, I ran into a little bit of burnout around that, and our whole team did. It didn't solve the problem, which is that in the fundraising world, we also have this really high turnover. Everybody is losing their development officers. Everybody's going to the next job. Everyone's always willing to pay more for a good fundraiser, kind of like I was mentioning earlier, to hold on to those folks. Everyone is trying to get the best folks. So it drives the market price up for everybody, and everybody's always jumping jobs to kind of see their careers progress. And I took a look at whether or not there could be technological solutions to these same problems. That if I was going to help steward an event, how could we create a system that would replicate all the steps within an event, that if William needed to run an event, and then Alejandro needed to run an event, and then Dominique needed to run an event, they could all see the same framework of steps. Now, they might do them a little bit differently or in a little bit different of an order, but all the different pieces would be in place. And so Blueprint, my product, which is like a proprietary kind of project management software, was built around the idea to fundamentally help you kind of walk your way through those steps. The first thing that I always talk about when it comes to fundraising is that people give to people. The instinct in our fundraising world is, how do we get the biggest check with the easiest amount of work? And that is true. And the answer to that is by having a relationship with the person that's going to do that for you. Just like some practical examples of that, I am currently serving as the executive director of another nonprofit, and they had a historical relationship with this organization, had a historical relationship with Microsoft, and it had gone sour. It wasn't very good. And when I started, we came in, we had a conversation with Microsoft, probably the coldest and driest conversation I've ever had with somebody that was a supporter and funder in my entire career. And I walked out of that meeting and I was like, wow, we're not ever going to get anything from Microsoft ever again. And one of our other board members was like, well, I know someone that's retired, former VP from Microsoft. I know her really well. I'm going to invite her to join our board of directors. And so we worked on building a relationship with her. And I'll talk a little bit as we go through how to approach that. We built a relationship with her. We invited her to our board of directors. She accepted that role in December. And over the last 4 months, we've had meetings with the head of gaming, the head of partnerships, the new president of Xbox, one other kind of VP level at accessories at Microsoft. And all of that stemmed just 8 months after having the coldest meeting that we possibly could have. And that's because The board member that we developed a relationship, she had a relationship with all these other executives, all these other internal folks at Microsoft. And we were able to bypass some of the negativity and some of the history and some of the challenges that we had to get over through those relationships. And so the first thing that we're always encouraging people to think about is, how do we find our way to the right people? How do we make sure that we're getting in front of them in ways that are effective? And how do we then kind of turn those into things that are going to be valuable for us? It all starts, though, primarily in how we build our relationship with the prospective board member who is now a board member is always through passion, it's through vision, and it's through impact. When I kind of break these out for whoever is the lead fundraiser at your organization, passion has to be something that's coming across the board from whoever that leader is and how that impact is being made. It's got to be done at a personal level. It's got to be representative, and everybody's got to feel authentic about what that passion is. I think we've all met a person or two, maybe seen them on social media, that seems really energetic and really really outgoing, but is inauthentic in the way that they connect with folks. And that is that lack of like passion for the work and passion of that connection. So be sure that whoever is leading those conversations within that outreach for you is somebody that embodies that. And if it's not somebody on your team that's trying to build that relationship in that way, find the right person that can be able to do that. In our case, we were also able to do that through another board member. I feel comfortable doing that. Not everyone's always going to be comfortable with everything they have to do. And so understanding who can be the lead in certain areas and have that leverage is always a good place to look at and say, okay, this person is really looking for an outgoing and vibrant personality. That doesn't fit who our chief development officer is. We need to send this board member, or we need to send the executive director, or we need to send this manager, whoever that might be in that case. Apply that application of like who is going to be able to convey the thing that whoever you're targeting is passionate about. The next area is then vision, right? And the reason I say vision is because you can have all the needs that you want, and you can have all these things that you've already done historically. And those things are, we live in a what have you done for me lately social media world, and it crosses over into the nonprofit sector. It isn't just about what you've done. It's about where you're going and how you plan on getting there, and identifying and having that vision in a place and a way that is articulated or be able to be shared by other people or the team member that is leading that is critically important in this process. So I came into an organization, I've mentioned this a few times, the Able Gamers Foundation. We help people with disabilities get access to video games. And so we've been doing amazing work. We're the only people that give free equipment to people with disabilities to be able to play games. But we've been doing that for 21 years. And so when we came in, it didn't have vision. It didn't have depth. There wasn't something that people could get excited and be passionate about leading us towards. And so we started a new initiative where we're now trying to make an effort to get adapted esports, so esports on adaptive controllers and adaptive equipment, into the Paralympics. Now, it's a complete moonshot, and it's not something that is going to happen overnight. It's probably an 8 or 12 or 16-year vision of what we're trying to do. But we found a narrow way to find a piece that is part of who we are, part of what we do, and inspirational just in a soundbite to the people that we want to operate with. And so these are fundamental parts of how we rebuild a relationship with somebody like Microsoft and envisioning what that looks like. So you have to think about what your organization is, what is the impact of that, how does that impact the ecosystem around you, and try and have some kind of vision for how you will influence that space and what kind of difference you'll make. And all that then just turns into what your impact is. You're able to take that vision and take that vision of where it's going and saying, this is how this is going to make a demonstrable difference from an impact perspective. And so those are really the core of what you need at the start to be able to engage with major donors, to engage with grant organizations, to engage with corporations. All of them engage a little bit differently with people. Individual donors are definitely going to be much more connected directly to your staff. Grants are much more process and reports and writing. Corporations are much more impact and shared leverage. How are we benefiting each other in this process? How is this benefiting my community? How are my CSR dollars helping me from a marketing or a benefit perspective as well? All of those have a little bit of a different layer about how they implement. But the way to overcome that in all of them, in almost every instance, is if you have passion and vision and impact, however you're putting that in forward in those relationships, you're going to be able to take that to the places that you want. How do you do that then? We have all these pieces and all these items. And the main way is to remember finding ways to tell that through stories. How are we going to take the examples of all of these things that we're talking about and turn them into impactful, tied into stories about what you're doing? And so that could be stories about your clients. It could be stories about your prospective clients, the impact that you've been doing, former staff that have worked with you, whatever that is. Focus on storytelling is something that I talk about a lot, because you know what your program is, but have you spent a lot of time thinking about how that feels in a story with other people? Have you shared that with your friends and your family members? How are you kind of embodying what those stories look like? Are they through video? Are they through social media? Decide the ways that you want to do that. There are thousands of different ways to tell stories, but have that story ready for you in that deep, impactful way. Stick with that mentality of storytelling as the way and the means to share that. Impact is well documented and well written in many instances through a position paper or through issue papers or things like that. But those are not the ones that are, unless you're in front of the Gates Foundation and you're right up their alley for their grant application. Those kind of stories are not the ones that are going to make an impact. It's the ones from the heart. It's the ones that represent what you're doing. So an example for the Able Gamers Foundation is that we have a player who is 100% blind that plays Mortal Kombat, and he uses only sound cues to be able to play that. And we have people that come and play against him. We take him to different shows and different instances all across the world. People are able to experience that directly from him, hear him talk about it, hear him tell the story, and have that make an impact. That may not be how you tell your story in particular, but think about what that embodiment is and that medium of how you're telling your story. And if you don't have a rapid fire answer for this is the medium and this is the way that we do our storytelling, I would say that that's an area to really focus on and spend some time on in that process. So now you've got your vision and your passion and your impact. You figured out how to communicate that through a specific story. Then you have to follow that up with relationships. You have to be able to track who it is that you're talking to, how it is that they're engaging. Remember each of your donors individually. Think of them, people give to people for a reason. Think of them as people. Think of them as the things that they care about. You know, another good example, if you would take that overlaid against like the video game industry, or like, let's say the food industry, some people might really care about their type of food or the single kind of restaurant, or they might really love wine, or they might really love a certain neighborhood, whatever those kind of things are. Remembering those areas about individuals and then building that relationship with them, but continuing to fuel it with the passion and the vision and the impact through your storytelling overlaid on that personal issue. That's where you'll end up seeing the highest level impact from your donors. And it doesn't have to be somebody that's giving you $100,000 from the start. Those relationships, just like they are with people around you, people that you know, your friends and your family members, are easy to fuel with those stories, with that vision, with a check-in, with going to get a coffee, to knowing the things that help those relationships kind of like tick and grow. That's how you want to essentially fertilize those relationships. Thinking about, oh, well, this person loves to hear about the strategic vision of the organization. We're going to go get coffee and I'm going to tell him about these 3 really big meetings that we had. So he's excited about where we're headed with it, what's happening here. Well, this person over here, he really cares about our players. Well, I'm going to have a conversation with him about how Carlos, our blind player, won a local tournament in Houston last week in terms of what he was doing. Being able to just kind of insert those and remember what it is that makes the individuals tick about the people that you're working with is really important. So keep notes in your head, keep notes in a spreadsheet, keep notes in your database. Remembering those relationship pieces is a critical function of how you move those forward. So then we get to like, how do we make the ask? And the first thing that I always talk about with this, and everybody is always a little worried about this, and especially even with the organization that I have joined recently, there's a guy on our team and he's just always worried that he's annoyed everybody all the time. And he's afraid to ask for things. He's afraid to follow up. He's afraid to send me emails. He's like, well, I emailed them 3 weeks ago. I really don't want to bother them. And I hate to break it to him. I was like, if you haven't heard from them in 3 weeks, they're probably not thinking about you at all. So that's something that you have to remember. You have to make the ask. Rejection doesn't mean that they're saying that they don't like you. It doesn't mean that you're annoying them. It doesn't mean anything bad. If you don't find a way to let them know that there's an opportunity for them to participate, then there's no way for them to participate in the first place. It just means that they can't help you right now. Be thinking about what that methodology is to that ask. Be thinking about what those cycles are. Again, keep notes on why they say no, whatever that looks like. Oh, I can't give right now We do our giving at the end of the calendar year, or we do our giving right around when we file taxes, right around this time of year. So then we know what that might look like for our tax situation. We give around this time of year because we give through a family foundation and we have an application that goes here. Keep notes about those asks and the responses and what people are telling you about those gifts or about how they want to make their gifts during those processes so you can identify and target and narrow those as you move forward. Now, for a lot of folks, these gifts are going to be generic. They're going to be part of your newsletter. They're going to be part of invitations to your event. They're going to just be the regular course of opportunities for people to be able to give through the donate button on your website. Making sure that people know about that and do that in particular is just generally critical. But then as you have individual donors or individual folks that you think have the capability to give more or an interest in giving more, don't forget to make them feel special in this process. Like going out of your way to ask somebody for a more significant gift than a typical letter or a typical email or a newsletter or whatever might go out is also perceived as a compliment to those individuals. They recognize it as you saying, we see how much you care about this organization. We see how much we think that you might be able to provide or give to this organization. How do you make means to be able to kind of continue to drive that forward? And then staying connected with them at the end of the day is the biggest key. That we all think, oh, well, they're reading our newsletters. They're following us on social media and you want to do these things. My main recommendation is that you can spend a lot of time worrying about your social media. You can spend a lot of time worrying about your newsletter, knowing who the top meaningful relationships and people are within your circles of who you need to stay connected with, and having a list that you're rotating through either on a monthly or a quarterly basis of, on this day of this month, I'm going to get back to this many people. And I'm going to make sure that all my board members once a month are going to get an email from me letting them know about what's going on within the organization. Or on the first Monday of every other month, these 5 donors are the ones that I'm going to reach out to. And I'm just going to say hello. I'm just going to stay connected. I'm just going to make them remember that we have this relationship. We've had this thing that we've built together. You're able to stay on their radar, and you're able to do that. It does not always have to be an ask. It can just be a, hey, hi, was thinking about you this week. We should get coffee soon. And even if you don't get coffee soon, that's okay. Then they will remember that you'll have remembered them. They may be able to be the ones to reach out to you the next time, but you can't foster and grow and develop a relationship if you don't stay connected with these donors. So setting aside time on your calendars to make sure, hey, on this day of this month, I'm going to go back through our database, or I'm going to go back through our Excel sheet. I'm going to say, who do we need to go through from this perspective? Having your spreadsheets or your target lists, or knowing who it is that you want to get to that have either already given to you or that you want to get to. Also thinking about, well, I just recently joined the Chamber of Commerce locally within my organization. And then there are these 10 businesses that really align closely with what we're trying to do organizationally. I want to get in touch with these 10 people. It's even okay to send an email to those 10 business members, even if you just saw them once at a chamber meeting, even if you've emailed them once every other month for the last 4 months and they haven't replied to you. Whatever those mechanisms are, you're not going to get a response if you can't engage with them, if you haven't reached out to them, if you haven't put the effort in. Whether it's through new target development, whether it's through current target development, whether it's your board members, your donors, whatever that might look like, the encouragement is always, you can almost do no harm by sending a hello text and saying, hi, how are you? How are the kids? How's your dog? How was the move? How was whatever that thing is that you were doing? Building your relationships under those kind of functional pretenses of having that relationship with those individuals. That's the thing that's ultimately going to like help some of these pieces move forward and really pay off. One of the best examples of this is that I have gotten very close with our board member, who is the former Microsoft executive, but she and I really connected when we were talking about, I was talking about somebody else that we work with. She was talking about her daughter. They're both Gen Z. They both kind of approach and think about the world the same way. And we probably had a 40-minute conversation about them. It's not even my kid, but we had a 40-minute conversation about them and how they work and how they approach life. We just got closer as an end result of that conversation. There were things that felt personal and connective, that tissue that was built between us. And it makes it much easier when I need to go and make an ask to her now, because we have this relationship and that connection together. And so whoever is leading your fundraising efforts, whether that is a board member, whether that is you, whether that is another staff member, making sure that they're thinking about these relationships from a connective tissue standpoint and building those networks as part of who you are and what you're doing on a regular basis will pay off very well in the long run. We sent this survey out with the newsletter and asked which areas that they want to get into. And the biggest two that we saw were individual donors and major giving. I wanted to talk a little bit about individual donors for a moment because of that. The first thing to remember with individual donors is that it's not something that's going to happen tomorrow, especially if this is a new program for you or you're just trying to start out developing these relationships or building these asks and the things that you need to do. They're not going to happen tomorrow, and they might not even happen next month. They might not even happen if we start a relationship today until December at the end of the year. The timelines can be lengthy in these processes, and don't be dismayed by what that is. Really look to that currency of the relationship that you've built with those individuals as something that you can count on or as something that is valuable. It won't always be monetary in terms of what you're getting. But if you can look to kind of the process and the things that you have developed with those donors, and you can say, this is a solid relationship. This is the benefit. These are the benefits or the things that we think that we can get from this relationship in the long term. This is how we've built it. This is what we're trying to accomplish. Then you take that as a victory and use that as fuel and motivation to stay in touch with that donor or stay in touch with that individual or soon to be donor in that process, because that's how you can ultimately make really deep inroads. An example of this is that we are trying to get adapted esports into the Paralympics. And so we're making attempts to try and build relationships with the LA 28 and the LA 84 Foundation. And I've gone to like 6 LA 84 events in the last 4 months because of the Winter Paralympics that were going on and because of all the things that are coming in the World Cup. And Renata, who is the executive director of the LA 84 Foundation, is amazing. She's been all over the place lately. I've met her like 4 different times now. And the first 3 times she didn't remember who I was. But the fourth time, when I went to shake her hand, she remembered my name and she remembered who I was and she remembered who I was there with. I use that as kind of the motivation and the currency to say that we don't have a grant from the LA 84 Foundation yet. They have hundreds of millions of dollars, all of which they got in 1984 from the Olympics, and they have been giving that money back into the community around different types of gaming for a very long time now. We now have a connection. If I were in a situation where I reached out to her, or if someone reached out to her on my behalf, or someone mentioned me in a conversation to her, she would know who I am now. And that is valuable currency in the world of relationships, in the world of like networking, in the world of where you're going. So just because I haven't gotten money directly from that individual, or in this case, that organization, being on their radar, being aware, being part of whatever that is part of what that looks like. Now, we did have an initial conversation about whether there was grant money around esports, and essentially we were told no outright. That's not really what we do. That's not the Olympics. That's not putting aside the ableist mentality around what that looks like and what movement in the Olympics looks like. That was kind of the initial answer we got. But that doesn't mean that they don't know who we are now. And that doesn't mean that we don't have opportunity in terms of where that's going to go. There are huge inroads to make through these challenges and through that time. And so finding ways to kind of pat yourself on the back or feel like you've had successes in those intermediaries is a really important step in the process, because you are going to be told no, and you just have to get used to it. If you don't want to be told no and you're sitting on this call because you're somebody that works in fundraising, then you need to learn to be able to take no for an answer, or you need to find a different job. Because fundraising is basically being told no 85% or more of the time in just about everything that you're doing. So having no shame about what that looks like, but also, again, finding the milestone victories in that are the ways that you can kind of supersede that and get benefits. Alternately, the flip side of that, what are the benefits that then come with the challenges that I've talked about? And one is that good donor engagement means increased awareness. Another is that they're unrestricted funds. You know, we see a lot of organizations run into challenges because they take funding that is attached to something that they have to do, and then they have to implement that grant and execute it, and they either don't have the capability, they don't have the time and resources to do it, or it costs them more to implement whatever it is they're doing than whatever they were funded to do. Individual donors are a great resource because typically their funds are unrestricted. You can kind of do what you need to do with those funds. They can be really beneficial to your organization. The other really big benefit then is networking and connections from those individual donors. And one of the biggest pieces of advice that I have about fundraising that I will give to anybody is that the check that any one person can write you is likely smaller than the benefit of whatever their network is and how you can leverage whatever that network is. Now, that's not everybody. Like Mackenzie Scott and Bill Gates and Oprah Winfrey, They can all write checks that are bigger than what their impact of their network might be. But even in those instances, if you think about it, their networks are still very tangible and very meaningful and something that you can get a lot of leverage out of. And so I really encourage people to look holistically when you're trying to partner with an individual donor and say to yourself, what are other ways that this donor can help me, can benefit us? Where are there ways for us to be able to work together to expand our growth and our network? If you can bring in 4 or 5 new people that want to learn more about what you're doing, want to share about what you're doing, want to have it be part of the impact of what it is that you're doing, that is as valuable as anything else that you can be doing. Now, obviously, we all want checks. We all know no money, no mission. Mother Teresa said it best. We want those checks because you're going to live in a space when you're fundraising where there are a lot of no's, and there are a lot of no's that are being floated out there right now. Building your networks, building your connections, thinking about individual donors in kind of a fully holistic way is a really important part of kind of how you can move forward in those processes. I learned this quote from a capital campaign firm that I was on a team 18 years ago when they came in and pitched our organization about what a capital campaign might need to look like. And the first thing that the woman running the firm said was, she was like, ask for money, get advice, ask for advice, get money. And that applies across the board to corporations. It applies to foundations. It applies to individuals in terms of what that is. It's this idea that this is a constant cyclical process of how you're going through all of this. And if we, again, kind of extract money from the conversation, and part of what this looks like from beyond the checks that you're already going to go and get in this process, it's all these things are how your engagement is constantly going to happen. Remembering the donors are people, building and fostering a connection with them, sharing that passion, that vision, the journey, the impact that we talked about through storytelling, creating opportunities for them to then engage. This is when you ask them for something, whether that's money, whether that's access to their networks, whether that's for a volunteer hour, whether that's for in-kind support, and then asking them, connecting into their networks, being part of the visibility of what they're talking about, who they're sharing about, what they're talking about at work or at church or at home or at school, and then introducing you to new people who you then build relationships with. You share the journey, create engagement opportunities, get into their networks, and then rinse and repeat that process. It's really important for me to help people remember that this process is the one that's going to lead to more donors for you and more growth and more outcomes. It's very easy to try and drive your results from fundraising strictly around how much money you've raised. And I get it. I'm the executive of an organization that was going through some turmoil when I started. The year before I took over the organization, there was over $1.7 million in revenue coming into the organization. In the overlapping year of when I took over as interim executive director, that dropped to $400,000. So we had a huge drop off in terms of what that looked like. Those things are meaningful numbers. We've bounced back from that since. We all have to pay the bills. We all have to run payroll. But the way you build that back up is continuing this process over and over, finding new people, building relationships, finding out how they can help you, making sure that you're keeping those people then in that queue of the relationship and people that you're connected with and seeing and sharing your stories with, and then helping them find you new people to be able to do that. And so if you're able to stay kind of in that funnel over and over and over again, eventually as you're kind of tumbling that over and over and over, the people that are going to fall out of that are going to be donors. You're not going to know always who exactly. You're going to think that it's this person over here. It's Lydia is the one that's going to be the one who's going to be able to write me the big check. But it's going to turn out to be Arnali is going to be the one. She's friends of Lydia. And we didn't even know that we were going to get connected to her, but we went out to get coffee. She was going to a lunch meeting with her right afterwards. We all said hello. We hit it off. And all of a sudden, we now have this amazing relationship with a new potential donor. At the end of the day, more than anything else, it is an engagement game and it's a numbers game. And trust me, I also know that everybody is super busy and you kind of have to decide how you want to parse out your time and pick and choose where you want to do some of these things. And so that's why I mentioned at the top of this, all of these things act as universal instances. They'll apply a little bit differently for everybody in every organization, but the fundamentals here of what you need to accomplish, the ecosystems that you're trying to operate these principles within, once you've been able to narrow that and identify that and then build your vision of who the targets and the people and the networks that you want to be expanding into, and then repeating this process, that's the best fundamental way to be able to be like growing and developing your fundraising community. So that's it from a presentation perspective for me. I am happy to take questions or chat a little bit about individual situations or